Hi everyone, my name is Alexandra Cuarto. Welcome to Reclaim Your Health Summit, where our goal is to find out the root causes of many chronic illnesses, as well as finding out real and lasting solutions to prevent and reverse sicknesses through natural and functional medicine. Are you ready to reclaim your health back? Well then, let's go. I'm super excited to have with us Vicki Latham. She's a certified physician assistant, has 36 years experience in traditional integrative medicine. She graduated in 1992 from University of Oklahoma Health Science Center. Vicki has worked for many years as a women's health practitioner and a licensed midwife, delivering over 500 newborns. She lectures internationally on many health issues and is currently working on a book, The 5 First Steps to Begin Your Optimal Health Journey. So please join me in welcoming Vicki Latham to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. It's a great morning. It's a cold day here in Denver with snow on the ground. And but it's really great to be on your program, and I really appreciate you inviting me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. So can you please tell us a little bit why you have chosen to become a healthcare practitioner?
Well, to go kind of back to the beginning, I was raised in a small town in Oklahoma, and I was blessed to be able to run barefoot through the grass all day until mom called you and made you come in at night. I ate fresh green beans and tomatoes from our garden and um, whole organic raw milk growing up, and so I had some wonderful things, but I did have two really significant toxic exposures. One was we had back in those days what we called the fog truck, and during the summer the fog truck, which was spraying DDT, would come down the alley. And we all loved to go and run behind the fog truck.
My goodness.
And our parents would say, don't go run behind the fog truck. You might get run over. It had nothing to do with the fact that we were breathing in DDT. And I'm going to talk a little more about that later. But the other toxic insult that I had was that I really had very poor teeth for whatever reason. And so I even had amalgams in my baby teeth. And then I had multiple amalgams growing up. And after my first daughter was born, and this is just, now that I know about this, it's just kind of terrifying to me. I actually had 21 mercury amalgams put in my mouth while I was breastfeeding her from cavities that I got from during my pregnancy. And this was kind of back when I was just beginning my journey and really understanding about nutrition and all the things that are important for health. My father and my grandfather both died from complications of what they called Alzheimer's, but it was an atypical dementia. And my grandfather was a dentist, and my father was fascinated by mercury. When I was a child, we used to break open thermometers and we would roll them around on the floor and play with it. You did too?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we just didn't know that that was a highly toxic chemical that could get into our bodies and did get into our bodies, and the health problems that it could cause. So my journey as a health practitioner really began with the birth of my first daughter. I looked at the different ways that were the options for childbirth at that time. I call it the knock you out and drag it out with forceps method, was what they did in those days. And I kind of decided that if women all over the world could have babies without drugs and forceps, I could do it too. So I self-trained myself, read every book I could find on childbirth, had natural childbirth. And Dana had a 10-10 APGAR in Denver, which never happens because of the altitude, because they are used to having babies born drug-free. And so the doctor was so impressed. He said, would you come and teach our nurses what you did? Because we occasionally have, women who come in and have a baby, but not first babies. They don't come in and have babies without drugs. We've never seen that happen before. And so that kind of began my journey as I began teaching and educating people on childbirth. I became a lactation consultant, and then I became a childbirth educator, and then that turned into becoming a licensed midwife, which I did for 9 years, and we talked about that, and I have so many great stories, and it's such a blessing, you know, when you receive a baby into your hands. You really truly get to feel the universe move, and they are so precious, and to share that with families has been really the greatest honors that I've been able to experience in my lifetime. So it was very, very special. But then I found myself with a single mom with 4 teenagers, and I decided, how am I going to raise these kids? I really need some better income. So I decided to go to PA school, which I did, and I graduated. And right after PA school, I went to school on a public health scholarship to pay back. I worked at an Indian hospital, and that's where I really began. I had worked with my patients, of course, testing them for diabetes, and I knew a little bit about gestational diabetes and that sort of thing, but I really didn't have a depth of knowledge about diabetes until I worked at an Indian hospital. And people there had this very fatalistic attitude of, well, you know, our family, we all are diabetic, and I'm going to get diabetes, and I'm going to go blind. I'm going to have kidney failure. They're going to cut off my legs, and then I'm going to die. And so if anybody out there is a diabetic, I want you to know that diabetes is not genetic. It is epigenetic. And we're going to talk about that. So it's a good time to kind of explain that. You know, we're born with our genes, and those cannot be changed. But our genes are about 20,000 genes that we have, are each capable of thousands of what are called epigenetic expressions. These are the expression of the genes of what gets turned on and what gets turned off by our cells, and then it really affects our cellular function. So it can be a little confusing, and this is a brand new science. I mean, gosh, it's only maybe 10 or 15 years old that they even discovered this. And so a lot of people and things that we thought were genetic, we now know are epigenetic, but they can be passed up, it's proven, at least 5 generations. So I always say the one thing you absolutely will inherit from your mother are her toxins. So the toxic insults that she's had that has altered the genetic expression may result in some condition that you may even inherit while you're still in utero. But that doesn't mean it's genetic. And so the good news, this is your good take-home news, is if it's not genetic, you can change it. And you can change it through primarily all kinds of lifestyle modifications, of which I think one of the most critical is detoxification, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So that's kind of how all of this came about, how I personally got into detoxification was because, like I said, in my family, we had this history of dementia. And at the age of 58, I started having some pretty significant memory issues. And I privately, secretly went and was tested, and they said that they believed that I was in the early stages of some kind of dementia. And of course, this was absolutely terrifying because I really thought my life was going to be over, and I still had, you know, children in college, and it was really just so scary. And within about a month, though, I was trying to make a decision on whether I was going to start treatment or what I was going to do, and I began to learn about detoxification. So I began a detoxification regimen, and within literally about a week, my memory came back.
Wow,
And
that is
it
something.
was such a profound experience that I began to say, I got to learn about this. I have to learn everything I can about detoxification and what is going on. Because, of course, I was seeing these problems of brain fog with my patients. And so I began to learn all about this. And so over time, I ended up kind of being a semi-expert. I don't claim really to be an expert. I don't have any major formal training in this. Most of it is just what I've learned myself and what I've done through my self-study and what I've done through sharing detoxification with others and seeing the profound experiences, life-changing experiences that
Yeah.
they have had. So that's how I got into
That's
all
how
of
you got
it.
into it. Wow. Yeah. So you mentioned like the toxicity. Can you start telling us a little bit like what are the causes of some of our sicknesses and like I mean what it actually can happen, right, when we are exposed to the toxicity? Like what are the major concerns?
Well, I think the number one thing that people need to accept, because back when I started this in 2006, um, I mean, when you talk to people about toxins, it was just deer in the headlights, look, I mean, it's just like they didn't believe you at all. And now everybody's got a detox product that they're marketing, and toxins are in the news. It's everywhere that talk about toxins. But I think the number one thing is for you to realize that you really cannot avoid them. They're in everything we eat, what we drink, what we breathe, what we put on our skin. These toxins are everywhere. And we have in our bodies amazing detox pathways by which our liver and our kidneys and our bowel and our sweat glands and even our breath help to detoxify our bodies. As I say, we got to pee it out, poop it out, sweat it out, or breathe it out. But you got to get it out. And whenever we're exposed to a toxin, our body makes two decisions about that. If it can, it does put it through one of those pathways and gets rid of it. But if it can't, it doesn't want it roaming around in the bloodstream where it can really harm you, so it goes and the medical term is sequesters it. It stores it somewhere. And one of the two places in our body that our body likes to store toxins is in our fat and in our bones. And specific heavy metals have kind of an affinity for displacing healthy metals in our body. So for example, lead loves to displace calcium in our body. So where does lead get stored? It gets stored in our bones. And of course it interferes with our bone matrix, and then you end up with problems with bone density issues. And so all of these things all contribute to creating havoc in our body. And then one of the things that I think is really important to understand is that these can also sit on the receptor sites for some of our really important hormones. Of course, they interfere with enzyme activity and other things, but it can sit on these receptor sites. So I thought a good example of this would be to talk about a chemical called BPA. BPA is a resin that's placed on the inside of virtually all canned food. And it's in there so that our food can slide out easier. I mean, that's really an important thing, and I don't think we could live without that, right? But that's why it's there. And eating 1 can of food a day will increase your BPA level, bisphenol A level, by 1,000%. It's also found in ink that's placed on receipts. So people who hand receipts, and I've been noticing people are starting to wear gloves that work and handle receipts a lot, and I'm really happy to see that, because that also contains BPA that can easily pass through our skin and be absorbed into our body as well. And you probably see things with plastics, children's toys, drinking containers that will say BPA free. And that's very important that you select those. Well, BPA has two favorite places it loves to live in our body if our body's detox pathways aren't able to eliminate it. And the two receptor sites it likes the best are testosterone receptor sites and insulin receptor sites. So it can go and sit on that insulin receptor site that's supposed to be taking up your insulin so that it can trigger the opening of our glucose channels to get the blood sugar out of our blood and into our cells so that our body can use that in our mitochondria with oxygen to make energy. But if that's blocked and you can't get the glucose inside the cell, of course it roams around out in the cell, and over time your pancreas has to keep working harder and harder to try to overcome this insulin resistance that's created by this toxicity. And so over time, of course, then we end up, your pancreas wears out, and then we call you a diabetic. But in the process of that, you may even have a period of time where you have low blood sugar because you may be producing too much insulin in your attempt for your body to overcome this this toxicity. And there's many reasons why we develop insulin resistance. Having this block by toxins in our receptor sites is just one of them. But who would imagine that you're actually increasing your risk for diabetes by eating canned food? And so by putting these things together, you can start making better choices about what you want to do and what kinds of toxins that you want to put into your body. Of course, because of my love of newborns and my experience with women, even the CDC states that the average American has over 200 industrial chemicals and heavy metals stored within their tissues and fat. And newborns are actually born in studies with over 200 toxic chemicals also at birth. Like I said, one thing you'll inherit from your mom are her toxins. And one of the really interesting things that came out of that study was that these babies in this study, that was the premier study, although this has been really repeated numerous times, but and shown to show approximately the same result. This initial study, many of the babies actually had DDT in their umbilical cord blood at birth. Now, DDT was banned in 1972, the results of the fog truck. And so how does a baby in 2005 have DDT in their blood at birth from a chemical that was banned 2 generations ago, or at least one? Well, it's because it was stored in grandma's fat. Yeah. And then it was passed on to mom, and now it's being passed on to you. Because we break down our fat at times of fasting. Anyone who's been in labor knows that you don't want to eat unless you want to throw up. And so, these are times of fasting when our body is going to break down fat. So babies have no functioning detox pathways until they're born. And this is what's really scary, because we used to really think the placenta was this barrier that protected the baby from toxins. And we now know that that's not true. So while hopefully mom eats fish and gets some mercury, mom can get rid of the mercury with her detox pathways. But if she doesn't, it has the potential to go into the baby where the baby is basically a closed system. They do urinate, and they have some detox functioning in their kidneys, but nothing in their liver until after birth. So their liver isn't able to detoxify that, and particularly mercury and lead, which mom also breaks down. If she isn't getting enough calcium, baby needs calcium, mom will break it down. And of course, along with that will come lead, and lead's a big problem that they worry about in pregnant women, because of the risk to the baby. And both of those chemicals are neurotoxins and have high affinity for fetal brain tissue, and actually developing brain tissue. It's not as big an issue in a mature brain, but it is a huge issue in developing brains. So, you look at all these things, and you say, okay, we can't avoid them. They're everywhere. It's damaging us. It's damaging our children. What can we do about it? And so that's where we need to, each of us, learn about detoxification. Because, I could go right down the list: arsenic, aluminum, cadmium. But you can go research that yourself. The people who are here can go, and Dr. Google will tell you everything.
That's
and you
great.
and you can learn these things yourself. Of course, the internet, anybody can say anything on the internet they want, and a lot of it is not true. And so I always go to wonderful sites like PubMed.org, where you can read wonderful peer-reviewed studies on this information. And then if you want to go to very conservative sites, you can go to the CDC or the National Institutes of Health. If you want other sites, then with people that are doing more progressive research, then you can look at other sites. I always kind of go find the most outrageous, then I go back and look at the other, and then I try to find something in the middle, and I look at all the different expressions and things people have written before I come up with my conclusion about what I think about that particular toxin and how we can get it, how we can avoid it, how we can eliminate it. But it is very controversial, and it is hard to go out and sometimes find accurate information. Okay. But it's out there, and you can find it if you look for it.
Yeah. So yeah, you definitely said that, like there's passive detoxification and there's active. So passive would be through the urine, whatever your body can actually detox on its own. Now, what can we do?
Well, actually, that's that's somewhat correct. Okay. But the way I define active and passive detoxification is that active detoxification is anything that you do to help your body to eliminate the stored toxins through your natural pathways, like you said, through the urine, through detoxification in the liver, passed in through the bowel, sweating. So all the things that most people think of as detoxification are active detox measures. So this would be, sweating through a sauna or an infrared sauna. It would be through different kinds of herbal products, or any kind, different kinds of glutathione and things that are going to stimulate better detoxification in the liver. Of course, exercising is going to be sweating, moving blood flow. Those are the kinds of things that are active detox. Anything that colonics to help clear the bowel. So most of the things that we think of as detoxification are active detox, and those ways of detoxing bring with them the risk of what's sometimes called a healing crisis or a detox reaction. Because if your pathways are not as healthy, or if they're completely overburdened, which most of ours are, you may have a more difficult time getting those toxins out. And if you do, then of course you are at risk of that. And in general, they usually don't harm you. They just make you feel really miserable. And so it's kind of something that you can that you have to kind of pass through. And of course, I'm always, I mean, even with prescribing medications with my patients, I am always a start low and go slow.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, I studied pharmacogenetics, and, you know, all of us have different enzyme pathways for different herbs, different drugs. And so sometimes our bodies are fast metabolizers, some are slow metabolizers. And so every one of us is completely unique. I think of anything that I've learned over all of my years of working with healthcare is that we're each one extremely unique. And what works for one person may not work at all for another. And, you know, as you've had your whole series here, you know, you may have heard some things where one person recommended one thing and someone recommended the exact opposite. But you know what? One of those things might work for some people and the other thing may work for other people, because we're all so unique and so special. And we all have this very complex epigenetics that are turning things on or turning things off. So I may have something turned off that you've got turned on. And so it's, you know, seeing each patient takes a lot of time. And that's unfortunate because our physicians are so overworked and overburdened, and you have to see 25 patients a day, and you can't do that and really see each person uniquely. And so, you know, I always really limited how many patients I saw a day, so that I could really, no matter how long it took, we try to figure it out. We try to get to the bottom of it. What is the cause of this? Because I don't want to just treat symptoms. I want to find the cause, and I want to fix it if I possibly can. So it's everybody's going to have a unique response to detoxing. And so I say one person may find that this works really well for them, and another. But then there's passive detox. And passive detox is where you actually put something in your body that works as a chelation agent that absorbs the toxin and removes it for you. And it's not dependent upon your detox pathways, because you can do this through some chelation therapy, but it's very expensive when you go and get formal with medication, chelation therapy. Make sure that you go to someone who really knows what they're doing, because the chelation doesn't just remove the bad stuff, it removes the good stuff too. And so you have to make sure that they're watching your labs, making sure that your calcium levels are not getting too low, and things like that. So it can be an acceptable alternative for some people, but I have found something that I think is more effective and better and safer, and that's using a mineral called clinoptilolite. It's in the family of zeolites. Mm-hmm. It is a negative charge and a cage-like structure. You ingest it, and it's super easy to take it. You want to make sure it's clean and purified and micronized so it can actually get into your cells and get into the bloodstream. But you use this to take it in, and it actually attracts and traps anything with a net positive charge in the body, and within 8 hours it's eliminated completely from the body. This is actually the only safe way to detoxify in pregnancy. You don't want to detoxify in pregnancy. You want those toxins to stay stored. You don't want them going into the baby. But if you do this during pregnancy, if you are detoxing, if you are fasting, if you are throwing up and you are in early pregnancy, you want to be taking something that, as your body is releasing these toxins from the fat, can capture those toxins and remove it for you, separate from your own detox pathways and with minimal risk of those toxins getting into the baby. So I love clinoptilolite. I wish every pregnant woman on the planet was taking it. My daughters took it during their pregnancies, and it's just a very powerful way to passively do it. And just one little mention about that, because of the chelation therapy question. Um, this only removes things that have a net positive charge in your body. So, for example, calcium has a +2 charge, and so does lead and mercury. But as lead and mercury exist in the body, they combine with other things. They don't exist as those little silver balls we rolled around in our bedroom. Okay, they exist combined with other chemicals in our body that still leave it with a net positive charge. But calcium, as it exists in our body, combines with other chemicals in our body that leaves it with a net negative charge. So when you take the clinoptilolite into your body, it doesn't attract your calcium. It only attracts the mercury and the lead.
Mm.
So you get the lead out. And so that's a really cool way to detoxify.
That,
So
yeah, those are some good tips because, like obviously I had it all confused, like I thought it was the other way around, but yeah, no, that's really good to know. So what can we do to protect our family and ourselves from all these toxins?
well, I think that you need to form a plan. There's over 80,000 chemicals out there that our bodies 2 to 3 generations ago, before the age of better living through chemicals was upon us. And we were very excited about that. But now that there's over 80,000 of them, less than 1% of them have ever been tested in humans individually, and virtually none of them in combination. So we really don't know all of the things that it's doing and how it could be changing us. So you just have to become very proactive. You have to eat organic as much as possible. One of my favorite, I've got 2 websites that I want to plug. I love the Environmental Working Group, the ewg.org. They every year publish their Dirty Dozen, which are the things you absolutely want to eat, or you want to make sure you eat those organically. Remember, toxins are primarily stored in fat and bone. We don't eat a lot of bones, but we do definitely eat a lot of fat in our diet. And I know you've had a presentation on good fat versus bad fat. And so anything that's animal fat is going to have stored the chemicals. And so things like butter, milk, meat, you definitely want to eat those in an organic form. But then there are other foods that aren't as critically important, and that's such a great website, the ewg.org. The other is to really look at the sources for heavy metals. You need to be aware that anytime you do any kind of injection, including a B12 shot, you are injecting heavy metals, aluminum, potentially, possibly mercury, and other chemicals. You're injecting those into your body, and along with whatever else that you think is going to be beneficial that you're injecting into your body. So you want to be aware of that. If you are going to do that, you want to be also doing active and passive detoxification. Eating lots of green leafy vegetables, very, very helpful. And counterbalancing the things that you take in with ways that you can detox and get it out. Oh, I do want to mention one other thing, and that is blood flow, the importance of really healthy blood flow. So, the 5 things that I think are so critical, my patients are like, oh my gosh, I've got information overload. How do I, sort through all this to know what I should do? So I narrowed it down to these really 5 important things. And if you can just work on these 5 things, and number 1 is excellent blood flow. Number 2 is exercise. Number 3 is, of course, a highly nutritious diet. I would call my style, Joel Furman coined the phrase nutritarian. I like to think of myself as a nutritarian. You know, I see somebody drinking a soda pop, and I just want to go, ah! It's just like me watching them put poison in their body, and there's absolutely no nutrition in that. So if there's no nutrition in it, don't eat it. My number one food rule is, if nature made it for food, eat it. If humans made it for food, don't eat it. You know, you know, it wasn't designed. Our bodies go, what is this? It's really basically putting another chemical in our body, including chemical vitamins. I really support whole food nutrient supplements, not ones made from just one more chemical, probably made in some lab and who knows where, because they're not. They're not. Our bodies are going to have to detox those too. So, you know, why put another toxin in there? Or like I say, why supplement your body with nutrients that you should have eaten with a chemical when you can supplement them with a concentrated food source? So I'm all for natural whole foods nutrients. Better blood, extremely excellent blood flow, exercise, excellent diet, detoxification, and stress. And we're going to talk about that at the end. So, but I do want to, I've just learned this in the last couple of years, and it has really profoundly changed my feelings about detoxification, my understanding about our blood flow. And that is that when I went to medical school, they told us that the heart did it all. We have about 75,000 miles of blood vessels in our bodies. We have our heart that beats, sends our blood through our arteries. Then it goes to the arterioles, where a little pumping motion begins that moves the blood flow through our 63,000 miles of capillaries, and then into the venules, the veins, and back to the heart. Well, I was always taught it's a closed system. The heart pumps, and that little pump just sends that little squirt of blood all the way back to the heart. And so I've discovered that's not true. It's not true. And most people don't know it's not true. And I didn't know it was true. It was not true. And so what happens is that the earth has a magnetic field around it. As we move through the magnetic field, we create a tiny little electromagnetic charge that's measured in microteslas. And this little charge stimulates the body to release nitric oxide, which begins a pumping action that's called vasomotion, that actually opens and closes and shunts our blood flow in our capillaries everywhere it needs to go. And then how much oxygen, what percent of oxygen do you think is delivered to our cells and our tissues from the blood in our arteries?
What's percentage? I have no idea.
None.
None. Oh, okay.
None. So 100% of our oxygen and our nutrients are all delivered to our cells from our capillaries. There's a little single thin one cell wall that passes all of these things into our cells, our tissues. And not only does the magnetic field and its electrical magnetics response to our body move our blood flow, it also moves our lymph flow, and it also moves our interstitial flow. So, and that's also where our body detoxifies. That's where we remove the carbon dioxide. That's where we remove our other metabolic waste like lactic acid, and that's where we remove our environmental toxins as well. So the capillaries, we call it the mighty little capillary. It's in our capillaries that all this action happens. And then when that becomes sluggish and isn't moving well, which happens to all of us as we age, then we aren't delivering the groceries, we're not taking out the trash, and we're also not delivering our immune fighters, because all of that happens there. And we're not delivering our hormones, because that's where that happens too. So learning the importance of really good blood flow in the capillaries. And there are things that you can do to increase your capillary blood flow. But one of the most important things is to go out and walk and run through grass barefooted,
Yeah.
like I got to do as I was a child. And it's hard to do that these days. And but going out and moving through the magnetic field is so critically important. And so it's not just that the exercise that we do moves our heart, exercises our heart, but it actually causes the movement of into our body of all the things that our cells need to be really healthy.
Yeah.
So all of doing, all those things to have good blood flow, to detoxify our body. You don't have to take out what you don't put in. So, try to do what you can to avoid that. There are people that and informational websites that can talk about. Deborah Dad, you had on here. She sells an entire line of toxic-free products. Everything from what you sleep on, air purifiers, water purifiers, all those things. I support all those things. I don't personally sell or promote them myself, but I certainly think all of those things are so important. And there are people who will even come into your home. They're experts in this, and you can hire them to come and look through your house and see what's going on in your house and how you can avoid toxins. So you just have to be proactive. And if you can support groups that are being proactive, another one that I really like is called the World Mercury Project. And they are doing just the best research that I see out there on the damage of all kinds of heavy metals as well as mercury to our bodies. So if you can support with your income, maybe a little bit, some of these groups that are out there being proactive, and because all of these chemicals are innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
And the company that makes them aren't going to prove that they're safe if they're not forced to. It's expensive to do this kind of testing. So it has to be a grassroots movement of all of us that say, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take this anymore. You're not going to load our babies and our children and us and our food and our water up with these chemicals, and because it's harming us and it's harming our future. And, a lot of these heavy metals have a major effect on our fertility. And the effects of the epigenetics are the most serious in the 4th and 5th generations. We're 3 generations now into the better living through chemicals stage. Maybe halfway into the 4th generation. And what are we seeing? Over 50% of our children with chronic illnesses. I mean, this is so terrifying. And I know that toxicity is a major contributor to this.
Yeah, no, that is so true what you just said. And we have to be our own health activists. We can't just assume that, like the people who produce these products, that they will, take care of us, right? Because it kind of comes down to money, and we have to be the ones pushing for the change.
That's
so
right.
Definitely, yeah, something like that. It's great that, like that information is put out in the front. So I know we talked about the chemicals. Now, what about our relationship, the stress, and our thoughts? What kind of damage do those have on our health as well?
Well, it's huge. It's really huge. In fact, I know diabetes right now is 21% of the population of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And by 2030, they estimate 34% of the population worldwide will be diabetic. Well, it can't be that they all just ate too much sugar. And toxicity, of course, is playing a huge role in this. But also, it's stress. Mm-hmm. Because whenever we're stressed, our body goes into what's called a fight or flight or sympathetic state. And in that state, our body kicks out some chemicals One of the most damage, of course, is cortisol. And what cortisol does when we're stressed is that it affects our digestion, it affects our thyroid function, it affects, it raises our blood sugar. Um, so then you can get into the whole cascade of metabolic events that happen with elevated blood sugar. It doesn't have to be from eating the sugar. It can be from just the chemicals that are released, these stress chemicals in our bodies. And so, taking time to rest, taking time to sleep. People don't sleep anymore either. Sleep is so critical. And when does our body do its primary detoxification?
When we
While
sleep.
we're sleeping. That's right. They have this new thing they've just learned. I mean, this is hot off the press within the last year that they've discovered. They knew there wasn't lymph tissue in the brain. So how did the brain detoxify? And they've learned that they've named it the lymphatic system, that our glial cells actually shrink while we sleep, and the brain increases the fluid, detoxifies, and drains it back out while we sleep. But you have to get into the deep levels and into REM sleep for this to occur. And so many people, their sleep quality is so poor that they're not detoxifying their brains. So, and people they're so stressed, they're so stimulated on caffeine and during the day, and then they wonder why they can't sleep at night. They're so running around, stressed out to the max, and they don't take time. We're just eternally distracted. It's so hard to stay focused on one thing because every time you open an email, it's somebody wanting you to do something for them, and so, you open 10 emails, you got 10 people all wanting to saying, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. Everything, is doing that. And I love this story. There's a man who, he's passed now, but his name was Jim Rohn, and he was a motivational speaker on human productivity and personal development. And he has this story I call the coffee story. And so here's this question for you. If your worst enemy puts arsenic in your coffee and you drink it, what will happen to you?
You will probably die.
What if your best friend puts arsenic in your coffee and you drink it? What will happen to you?
You will probably die.
That's right. And so the moral of the story is, watch your coffee. It doesn't matter who poisons it. It still does its damage. And the thing is, we can't control who poisons our coffee. But we can decide whether we want to pick it up and drink it or not.
Right.
We can decide if we want to internalize that stress or we want to just pass and let it go and let it come to pass, not come to stay.
Yeah.
And that's a choice we all make. We're very creative beings, but we create from what we think about. And we think about the input that we put into our brain. And if you put garbage in, garbage is going to come out.
That's right.
Toxins are going to come out. And so I think it's real important that people take on a quest to discover their purpose. We all end up somewhere. We just want to end up somewhere on purpose. And so go on a quest to, I hate the word find ourselves because we're not really lost. We're just more confused and distracted. And I think most of us really know what our gifts, what our skills are, what we're good at, what makes us happy, what makes us feel satisfied, what's interesting and stimulated. Like for me, I can sit down and read journals on OBGYN all day long.
It relaxes you.
Don't make me read a book on dermatology. I just don't. Or respiratory therapy. Oh my gosh, you want to put me to sleep? Respiratory therapy.
There you go. So if you have trouble sleeping, this is what you can read.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So I could pick up a book on that. But I can just read, anything that has to do with toxicity, babies, mamas, um, uh, gynecology, childbirth. I can read that stuff, and I just eat it up. It's just like
Yeah.
canned food for me, and I
Yeah.
love this stuff. And how our bodies work, and how we have excellent cellular health. I mean, those are the things. And so out of that has come the Toxin Clear Health Network, which is my organization that I formed back in 2006. I have a website, toxinclear.com, and another one called toxinclearmoms.com to help moms make healthier, toxin-free choices for their kids. So everything I have is branded Toxin Clear, and so I want to be somebody who doesn't put arsenic in somebody else's coffee as well. I don't want my relationships to be toxic, and I don't want to be toxic, contribute toxicity to someone else's relationship.
Yeah.
But I think that if we have more of a sense of what our purpose is, what we're supposed to do, it's easier to say, go for it. I wish you well. But for me, I know I have to stay on track. I have to stay on purpose, and I have to say no to that. But if you don't know where you're going, how do you know where you are?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, it's the balance, right? Like it's all the toxic stuff and then your own mindset, because that also becomes toxic as well to you or others, right? Like you said, what
Yeah.
goes in and has to come out. So I know you probably have something for our audience. Can you share
Well,
what you
I
have?
do. I do. Um, if you go to my website, which is toxinclear.com, there's a place there where you can send your name and web email information. And if you do that and mention that you saw me on this program, then I will give you a 2-hour consultation. 1 hour, there's a health survey form that you can fill out, and we'll review that together, and I can help you discover possibly what your unique toxicity issues might be, and help you through these 5 things: better blood flow, more exercise, more nutritious diet, detoxification, and stress reduction or stress management. How we can work through those things to help you balance your life out a little bit. So the first session would be, talking about your specific issue, and the second time we got together would be going over a suggested plan that I would come up with to help you on your optimal health journey.
Wow, that is wonderful. Like 2 hours. That's really generous. Like, thank you so much for that. I know everybody would just absolutely hop on that, because it's so important, right, to take that first action and find out, what's wrong. So thank you again so much. This was absolutely lovely, and I have learned a lot, and I know a lot of our audience have learned as well. And I know, like, everybody will be hopping on for those free sessions. So thank
I hope
you.
so. I hope so, because I really love what you're doing. I know that this has not been an easy journey for you to put all this together, and but you've done a wonderful job, and so congratulations.
Thank you again for that. And thank you everyone for watching. It was really great to have that. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We will see you next time.